Welcome back to the Course Creation Incubator. I'm Gina Onativia, online course coach and consultant. And last week, I talked all about expanding your ideal student research, really drilling down and knowing if you have a paying student. I want to continue that conversation today because I get a lot of questions about how to figure out if you've got a paying customer and student once you put out your course. I also get a lot of questions about standing out above all the noise inside of the course creation market. And when it comes to serving your best student and putting your best brand voice forward, I think of Marc Figueroa. Marc has been one of my biggest mentors. We worked together first at Tony Robbins, where together we built messaging around a lot of different products and services for Tony. I really learned how to communicate to course students from Marc, and of course Tony. Then Marc went on to Vistage International and brought me along. And it was like going to Digital Marketing University because I really learned about content marketing, nurturing leads, social media, and so much more. And through it all, Marc taught me about how to stay true to your brand and develop a strong voice. Today, Marc is CMO of Tiger 21, a peer membership group of high net worth entrepreneurs, investors, and executives. He's super busy, as you can imagine, but I love that he made time for you and I so we can really hone in on our brand voices. You'll see how amazing he is in a minute and why he's one of my most valued mentors. Let's listen in. Marc, I am so excited to have you on the podcast. Welcome.
Thanks for having me, Gina. Great to be here.
Let's dive right in because there's a ton I want to speak to you about with your expertise. I talked in my last episode about knowing your ideal customer and really going beyond simple avatar exercises. What do you think we get wrong when we're first digging into who we want to serve? And what are your best tips for figuring out our best student?
Yeah, what's really important here, Gina, is, you really have to take those extra steps to really find out, what the core of your audience and who they are. I think that the mistake that a lot of folks make is if you cast too wide of a net, your course will only really resonate with a small sliver of people, and you won't be really relevant or add value to most people. And that's the key. It's kind of like, you've heard this old adage about, spray and pray, and you hope that you cast this wide enough net that you'll attract people. But also the perils of that is you're being too general and too broad. And so little of what you say will really have impact with the people that you're actually trying to connect with. And so you're wasting time, energy, resources, and maybe even dollars. And so it's really important that you really spend the time, to really understand who you're trying to target, and really just keep, penetrating and asking more questions about what makes them tick. And we can talk about what those things are and all that. But I mean, there's a litany of things that, you should be asking and trying to figure out to really, really drive, because once you really understand your audience and who you're trying to, drive to your course, that drives everything. I mean, it drives your messaging, it drives your branding, it drives your, how you are conveying your message, what you say, how you say it. I mean, it drives everything. And there's a lot of liberation in that when you know that. And so, because you feel confident in that your message is really going to penetrate.
Let's talk about some of those questions, Marc. And in the last episode, I also talk about the why question, and that's something you taught me early on as my mentor. Why do they feel this way? And keep asking until you drill down to that real core motivator. But I'm curious, what are the questions that you ask when you're getting to know an audience, when you're approaching messaging or how you want to speak to an audience?
Yeah, I think it starts with I think what we all know is really kind of knowing your white space and building a key understanding of what's driving the target audience. So, who are they? What are their goals and their challenges? What are their fears? What keeps them up at night? All of those things. But you really should start drilling down into, what's missing in their lives, right? What problem are they trying to solve? And then that starts to answer the question, okay, how does my product or my course really fill that gap? And, what do they need to hear from you? Because that really drives the messaging aspect of things. So, the more you know about what gap they're trying to fill or what's missing in related to your product, the better. You know, and how you get to that, and the more questions you ask, is figuring out, where they congregate, right? What are they reading? What content do they consume that drives them? How are they consuming it? Not only will this help with, the subject matter that you're producing, but the type of content that you're producing. And once you're confident with your audience and who they are, again, what I said before is that it drives everything. It drives how you develop your own course, right? The messages that are in there, the marketing and the messaging that attracts your customers, keeping them engaged, right? It drives that because you're adding value. And hopefully, this whole circle of it is that you'll create brand ambassadors out of this that really drives new business. And, Tony Robbins has raving fans, as we know, we've heard it from him. If you can get those raving fans or those happy customers doing the marketing for you, think about how much you are scaling your efforts. It outperforms anything that you can do, on your own. Yeah. So, again, once you're confident with who your audience is, that it really drives everything. It drives how you develop your course, the marketing and messaging that goes along with that and attracts your customers, keeps them engaged, keeps them repurchasing. But I think more importantly too, is, it hopefully creates that brand ambassadorship that really drives new business. And, as Tony Robbins says, creating raving fans is really what's going to drive your business, because if you can get happy customers doing the marketing for you, talking about how great your product or your course is, think about how much you're scaling your own efforts. It outperforms anything that you can do on your own when your own customers are actually, speaking about your product for you. It's extremely powerful, and outperforms anything you can even do on your own.
I love these questions that you're asking, Mark. The one I really like is what's missing in their lives. And sometimes I get course creators that are really broad and they say, oh, well, what's missing is happiness or companionship because they feel lonely. And to me, that feels too broad, like too nebulous. What would you say to a course creator who's going too broad like that?
I think it's continuing to drill down on that line. If what's missing in their life is happiness, why? You always have the question of what's driving that unhappiness. You have to ask the reason why. And it could be a variety of reasons. And then once you start getting the reasoning of what's driving their unhappiness, then you can drill down on that even more, because, you have to get closer to the specifics of what that gap is. Why are they unhappy? You have to understand what's behind that, because until you do, you'll never get a message that resonates with somebody on a very personal level. So you just have to keep asking, why is that? Right. And then that'll drive another line of questioning. Once you kind of start getting that answer, you can just keep on drilling down. And the more you get people to help you understand that, I think that the easier it'll be for, you to drive, your course creation.
Okay, I 100% agree. And I remember go way back to our Tony Robbins days. So with Tony, we would deal with a lot of different subject matter, right? So we'd go from relationships to finances, to health. So how did you kind of refocus yourself for each of these areas? Like, how did you, when you were approaching a different marketing project, what were the first questions you asked yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's great because, you just start asking the question, let's say it was about, your wealth.
Yeah.
And there was some money issues that you were having. And then you just start, you really just start drilling down and asking, typical questions that surround uncertainty, about wealth. And it's really understanding, because there's a lot of different inputs that, maybe drive anxiety about wealth. I mean, and what it impacts. It impacts a lot of, this is the thing too, that certain areas of your life, whether it's health or wealth or relationships or whatever, it impacts everything, Right. And so, that's, I think, what you have to be really aware of is understanding, I guess, the emotion, the emotional connection between that one specific area, and kind of just asking questions all around it. So, if somebody is unhappy in their relationships, there's probably a money angle to that. there's a health angle to that. Because there's, there could be a professional angle to that. And really getting down to the core, because to me, once you start to understand that more and better and get comfortable with that, those are the emotional triggers that you can leverage to tell stories, to tell marketing stories, and to really get people excited about your product.
So you're doing something unconsciously here. You are digging for the pain, right? So is that where you start, or do you do that unconsciously, or you're consciously saying like, okay, where am I digging for the pain first and foremost?
Yeah, I mean, I guess I am. You're right, but it's what's interesting is that you're everybody's always we're trying to solve problems as human beings, right? We're trying to fill a need. We're always, as Tony says, running away from pain and running towards pleasure.
Yeah.
So, and your product has to really satisfy that. So, it is trying to trying to uncover pain, but at the same time, it's just trying to understand, the problems that people are trying to solve. That's us as consumers and as human beings. Whenever we're purchasing a product, again, we're trying to solve something. We're trying to fill something that we don't have, right? We're trying, whether that's a trip, whether that's, or whatever it is, we're always running towards something to feel emotional satisfaction, that we've solved it. So that's what I mean by, and yeah, that could be pain, but it also could be pleasure too. And so it's also just making sure that you understand that and trying to drive it at really the core, of what that's all about, because your product has to really answer those questions and satisfy those needs, to do it.
Okay. Since we're on the topic of messaging right now, how can we get better with our course messaging? I've got a lot of first-time course creators who have never marketed anything before, right? Never really worked on messaging. Like, how can we work on it? How can we get better?
Yeah, I mean, this is related to avatars, but it's really about, you need to establish your brand voice first. And you can think about this in these terms. You should be asking yourself the question about, what is your brand physique? What does it look like physically? Is it strong or bulky? Is it maybe sleek and agile? What is your brand personality, right? What attitudes or characteristics does it have? Is it have a sense of humor, or can you count on it to kind of always respond seriously? How does your brand mingle with other consumers and other brands? I love actually asking this question. Would your brand win Homecoming King, or is it a dark horse in terms of popularity? Right? Those type of things really bring out and make it tangible. Talk about what are the core beliefs that comprise your brand? Does it believe in giving back to certain community or causes? What does it stand for? And then, and finally, the self-image, right? What does your brand see when it looks in the mirror? What if your brand is a person? What does that person look like? What does he or she talk like? And most importantly, is it the same thing when you look at your brand in the mirror? Is it the same thing that your consumers are seeing? You really have to get aligned, with that. And so, to me, when it comes to messaging, before you do anything, you have to really get to those core elements, because once you really understand that really helps establish your brand voice. And it gets easier, and it gives you the swimming lanes, so to speak, to talk to your customer, right? You know what to say and what not to say based on the brand voice elements that you've created, right? And so you can literally have a guide at your desk when you're creating your course, when you're creating your supporting marketing, email nurtures, whatever they are. And it gives you the guideline from which to go about it. If you don't have that, it's really hard, and it makes it very random because you're not really sure, what's going to resonate. Also, too, is that remember that everything communicates. Everything does, not just the messaging, but the tone of your message, your brand colors, the colors themselves, and how they are featured. Is it whether they're textured, whether they're flat, whether they're whatever, and an email exchange with a prospect or a customer, which is kind of part of the sales process. How you may talk on the phone with a customer. Just really keep that in mind, that it's not just the marketing, It's everything. Whatever your brand, whatever the interaction is, and that could be a variety of things that I just described. That is your brand, and that is how you convey your brand. And so just be mindful of that. That everything you do, from again a simple response in an email to an invoice to everything that goes into the operational side of your business is how you are communicating your brand. So just remember that. I think that's a huge, thing. A couple of things too is the nuance of language is so critical. There's so many nuances, and this gets back to the brand voice that I was talking about and establishing those communication guidelines, because as whether you're writing copy, producing a video, producing an infographic, producing elements of your course, once you have those communication guidelines, it really drives the words that you choose to convey something. And so that comes with a ton of nuance. How you say it for one thing might not be the way you say it for another. So that's really huge. And another lesson I've learned along the way is about assumptions, and don't assume anything. So because you're disrespecting your customer when you do that. So, say things like, you may be experiencing this challenge versus it's understandable that you are challenged with this issue. That's a nuance in language, but an important one, because the former one is you're not making an assumption that somebody has this problem. The latter one is, right? And so you don't want your customers to say, you don't know me. You don't even know who I am. Why are you making an assumption that I have this problem? So those are some guidelines that are always in the back of my head whenever we're putting together a marketing campaign, because it's having respect for your customer, and getting to what really drives them.
Okay, there's so much awesomeness to unpack here. And by the way, a bugaboo for me is when I see a subject line that's like the 5 apps you need right now. Like, how do you know what I need right now? Like, that is a big bugaboo for me. Like, don't make assumptions and don't talk down to people, right? So that's another thing that you taught me. I want to go back to the guiding principles that you talked about. And this is something that you taught me from our days in Vistage. And when we would write for executives, and it would be our Bible. If you remember that, like, where's the document, you would say. And it was the do's and don'ts of writing in that voice. And remembering what's our tone. Like, we'd have sections for tone and what's the conversation that we want to have here. And that was our Bible. And I kept it up on my desk for every time. And I do that now with this podcast. And I've got a list of things because of you, Marc, that you taught me that, and to draw back from our content to the courses that we create, everything that we put out there. Because to your point, communication is everywhere, right? And we want to ground ourselves in these guiding principles. I think this is so critical.
Also too, what I've done as well is when you have your avatar, and that you're giving that your target audience a name, and they become real. What's a really fun exercise and keeps you disciplined is create a life-size cutout of who that person is, put it in your office.
Okay.
Always look at it. So when you're creating a course, and you're writing messaging, whatever you're doing to create that course, you should be staring at that person and looking at them going, what is going to resonate with this person? It just makes it's not only is it fun, but it keeps you grounded. It keeps you like, who am I doing this for? Right? You are providing a service to somebody. So, you always have to keep the customer in mind, and you have to be, you are working for them at the end of the day, right? You're trying to sell your product and sell your course, but at the end of the day, you're trying to add value to their lives, and so I think those are just fun ways of always keeping yourself grounded and reminded of why you're getting up in the morning and spending so much time creating these courses. And because I know your customers are doing that, Gina, and it's a lot of work, and I understand it's a lot of work, but the closer you can get to your customer and really understand what's inside their head, the better off you're going to be. And so that's a fun way of making it real, and creating discipline for you, in addition to what you said about, having those guidelines in front of you on your desk as a reminder of how you talk and what you say and when to say it, and what not to say and when not to say something. So, those are just good little triggers that I use now to constantly remind myself of, why I exist and what I'm here to do to help an organization, drive growth and drive sales.
Okay, I love that, Mark. There's so many great tips for us. I'm wondering if, say, I've created a brand for myself, because I do have course creators that go down a road, and then all of a sudden I look at their website and I say to them, "This feels like it's for everyone." And if I have marketing materials that feel like they're for everyone, how can I take a step back? Like, I think I can ask myself these questions, but do you have any other tips to help me really like hone in on who I'm serving so I'm not for everybody?
Yeah, I mean, and this is always a tough exercise. Um, when you talk about, features and benefits, and getting general, I always kind of, you know, and always asking that, why is that a benefit? How is that going to benefit somebody? And keep penetrating. You're right. I mean, you see a lot of websites and they're very broad, and they're very general. And I think how you can make them more specific is really allowing your existing customers to really tell their story of why. This is where testimonials are so important.
Yes.
Because it can get very specific on what your product is serving the customer. And you can be a variety, it can be, 3 or 4 or 5, a variety of different reasons why. Not everybody is getting the same value and the same benefit that your product is offering. Everybody's getting something different about it. So if you can be very specific from again, this comes from brand ambassadors who really endorse what you're doing, and they can share those stories. Not only does it make it specific, it makes it very relevant and tangible to somebody that you're trying to sell to. And this gets to where storytelling is such a huge part of branding and being able to convey, your story, because, those emotional elements are really, you have to get to the core of how you're tugging at your customers' heartstrings, what's driving them. They'll remember, they remember you for how you make them feel first and foremost, right? It's all about emotion. We make decisions based on emotion. We typically we rationalize our decisions, but we make decisions based on our emotion, then we rationalize it later, And so think about when you buy a car, when you buy, any big item that you are buying that you're really happy about, you do it because you make an emotional decision, but then you rationalize why you're doing it. Oh, I got 10% off. Or if you're buying a car, it's like, oh, it's an electric car and I don't have to, I'm saving the planet, and I'm not, I'm contributing to, I'm not contributing to climate change and all of those things. Like, you're rationalizing why you bought this car that you think is cool, right? And so, and that's okay, that's great. But the point is that, you always have to, you're trying to drive emotion from a customer. And because your brand it's all about how your brand makes them feel. Think about, I know we haven't been on planes a lot lately, but we're getting back to it. But, think about Southwest Airlines. And for anybody that's flown Southwest Airlines, I mean, think about their brand and think about your experience with when you get on their plane, and their flight attendants sing, they crack jokes. They're making usually what is a maybe flying, especially now,
Yep.
is stressful, and it's a stressful time. But they're trying to do whatever they can to make you feel good, right? So that, again, it's an airline with a heart, and they play that up with whatever they want to do because they want to make you feel good, because they know that flying can be stressful. They know you have a lot of choices, and that's how they differentiate themselves, and it works, because they use humor, good naturedness, all of those things that typically you wouldn't really think about when you think about flying, right? But they do that so well. And again, it's the reason why it works. The reason why I brought it up is because they really tug at customers' heartstrings. They make people feel good. And you know what? At the end of the day, that drives sales.
That's right. That's right. And you brought up stories, and I did a podcast on story testimonials, which I'll link to. And a lot of what I talked about in that podcast, Mark, is all those member stories that you and I worked on over the years. And of all people, highlighting your ambassadors is just critical to your success. And you said it, selling more. Like, really, at the end of the day, we hate to we don't want to be saying we're here just to sell, but that's, as marketers, that's what we're here for. Can you talk about where you think member stories or story testimonials land in as far as our branding and how important they are for the brand, and where to start with them? Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, they're critically important.
Critical.
They're critical. Because again, it brings a tangibility to your product. You're allowing your customers to tell the story. It just brings a human element to what you're trying to sell. Because we get in this trap of, I need to tell why my potential customers, why this product I think is great and is going to help them. And that's okay, but you get caught in this trap of, you're outlining the features of your product and not the benefits of your product. And, the benefits of your product is essentially what your customers are telling you, right? And so you need to allow them to tell that story. It brings you so much credibility and social proof, as I'm sure your customers, your creators are talking about. It just makes it more legitimate, and to be honest with you, what's great is, I'm a former reporter. And so I love allowing interesting people to tell their story. And, and then, I was grateful that, I was in the position that I got to tell their story on their behalf. But, there's so many people are just so interesting, and that's what I love about the world we live in. People are so interesting and have a lot of great things to say and a lot of great stories to tell. And if you can help, guide them in telling their story. Where I start, I was just doing this last week. We had, with the company I'm working for now. And I would just, call them up, and because I heard about a specific instance where, they leveraged the power of the product that I'm working with now. And I just really just kind of had an interview with them. I said, help me understand this. What happened? Why did it work? Why, what was special about the product? And, and tell me how you utilized it to reach an outcome. And you'll be amazed at the things that come out of people's mouths. And when they're happy with you, they're more than happy to share it with others. And that's where I start, it's just telling them their story, allowing them to tell their story. And people that are usually happy with what you've created want to tell other people, and they're more than happy to do it.
I love that you come from that reporter's curiosity, because if you go to networking events with Marc, true story, Marc will walk up to you and say, tell me your story. That's how usually I know we haven't done networking events in a little while, but you have a tendency, and I love it, to walk up to people and be like, so what's your story? When you're meeting somebody for the first time.
It is so funny, Gina, and this is really important for all marketers and branding people and people that are creating courses, is to try to be an active listener. Try to listen first. It's human nature. And I say this, and I learned this a long time ago. People really want to talk about themselves, and I've really kind of honed this over time. It's just human nature that people want to talk and tell their story. And I love to listen, because you'll learn so much from that. You become smarter as a result of listening to others and getting other perspectives. So, so that's just, I just love learning about people, because I think people are fascinating. What drives everybody. And you usually get really interesting stuff. And I think the art of this is being able to kind of ask questions along the way to keep prompting them to go further.
Yes.
Right. And that's something that that you have to hone over time, is when you hear something, say something really interesting, ask a follow-up question, right? Tell me about that. That's interesting.
Right.
Why did you do that? That's fascinating that you thought about it in that way. Go back to that. And why did you think about it like that? Like, just always be curious, curiosity will get you so far, because you just learn about so many people. And by the way, as you're doing this, you're learning so much about your customer, and you're driving so much, and you're helping yourself, because you're getting closer to that sweet spot of what makes your product so special. So that's always, what's that adage? Is that I forget, and you'll probably edit this out, but is it are you listening or are you waiting to talk?
Yeah.
Right? I don't even know what I forget.
Something like that. Yeah. We can listen to the show notes.
But I always think about that. Are you listening or are you just waiting to talk? And you'd be amazed when you really put yourself in that shoes. Like, you'll kind of figure out what kind of person you are. And I just love listening to people. I really do. And probing and learning more. And because you just get so much out of people.
Well, speaking of listening, I could listen to you all day, Marc. This has been such a treat. I know I need to let you go because Marc literally took a few minutes out of his very busy schedule as CMO of Tiger 21 to be here with me. And Marc, thank you so much for just sharing your insights. I really appreciate it.
Oh, great. Gina, thank you for having me. As you can tell, I love talking about branding and marketing. It gives such life to brands. So I could talk about this all day. So thank you for having me. I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, we'll definitely have you back on if you're willing to come back on.
Absolutely. Anytime.
All right. Thank you. Can you hear the passion in Marc's voice when it comes to brand? I love how authentic he is. He's the real deal, and he's committed to really staying true to a brand. Here's another awesome thing about Marc. He has unbelievable standards. He's always pushing me. When we work for Tony Robbins, we would talk about good, great, and then outstanding. Marc is always pushing for outstanding work. So if you've been thinking about getting your brand in order, answer Marc's questions as a great starting point. Really think about who you're serving. I'll be back next week to talk about what happens when you get into a course creation slump and how to move through it. Please rate and review this episode, especially if you're listening on Apple Podcasts, and subscribe. I would love to get the word out about this podcast to the entire course creator community. Until next week, go create, be you and be brilliant, and get it done.